Hi everyone. This video today I'm going to go over an entire demo, a full demo of VacationCRM as of today, which is July 9th, 2021. So if you're watching this much past that, there are chances that we've added more features since the recording of this video, but still might be a good one to watch to see a good majority of them. Now, if you are an agent that is not currently using VacationCRM, I realize this video is long. But it may be worth your time to watch the entire thing just so you can see everything that it's capable of. If you are wondering about a specific feature in VacationCRM, if you look down at the progress bar here on YouTube, I have set this up into different chapters so you can go to a section of the video showing a certain feature right away. They're basically like bookmarks, so you can click there, or like I said, just watch it all the way through. So we'll start here with the dashboard. This is the first screen that it takes any user to when they log in. I'm signed in as an admin user today, so some of the features or some of the options you see over here, if you're an IC, not an agency owner, you may not have everything here, but the way the system works is the same regardless of whether you're a admin user or a non-admin user. So we'll start here with the dashboard. This screen alone I feel is a reason for someone to log in first thing every day, because once you get going and start using this and enter your bookings, this screen alone has a lot of great information about the clients that you're working with. So I'll spend a little time here and go through some of the different sections as of right now. So first up we have the agent reminders section. This is a favorite section of a lot of users because as you book travel that is 10, 11, 12 months out, there are typically things you need to do later on that are very important, but it's too early to do right now. So the idea is you could put all your reminders in at the time of booking for future dates, and then as you approach the dates in which you've set them to be due, they'll pop up here, and then as you complete those items you can just check these boxes, mark them as complete, and they will disappear from the dashboard. Another thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to minimize this side menu bar here just so you can see more of the screen that we're actually on. We've got trip leads here. These are your clients that you're working with that haven't booked yet. Again, it's a great way to make sure you don't forget about anyone. The idea is you would put a lead in for each client that you start working with under their profile, and then you can change the status of the lead as you go. So it's going to start as maybe initial contact, and then info sent, and then quote sent. And one of the real big benefits here is it keeps track of how many days it's been since you've changed the status. So as this number increases, the lead is going colder and colder, so that can be your warning to reach out to the client to see if they're still interested or if they have any questions, see if you can end up closing that booking. Notices, this is just basically kind of like a virtual bulletin board that you can put things up for your agency. Anything you want yourself or your agents to see when they log in, you can put in here. You can put links in here, pictures. Pictures I think is not a big help in most cases, but just put that in there to show that it can be done. You've got all your final payments that are due listed here. All of your upcoming trips will be here, who's currently traveling. Upcoming birthdays and anniversaries. You've got your upcoming group trips. If you do a lot of groups, you can track them right here. Upcoming passport expirations. So like I said, a lot of good information right here in front of you. Now, I think that most users find that once they get logged in and start using this and really actually using it, they kind of live in here daily. They're logging in. It's one of the first things they do every day. So, you will see a lot of this as soon as you log in. It'll probably become habit. However, there is also a feature that you can turn on here under utilities for summary emails. And what this does is this allows the system to email things from the dashboard to you at whatever frequency you want. So I just opened this in a new tab here. And so you can see I've got this turned on, and originally everything will be over here. So you can move over from this column to this column the things that you want it to include on the summary email. So you can pick from all of this, and then here you can set up how many days before or after that event you want it to be included on there. So I've said I want overdue items, anything that's 14 days or less overdue, I want that to show up. Any recent form submissions from the last 7 days, any upcoming anniversaries for the next 7 days, and so on. You add all of those, and then you put in what days of the week and what time you want to receive those. So right now I have it set that it's going to send me this email with the summary of my dashboard every Thursday at noon. So, if you want to do like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or just Mondays and Fridays, or every day, whatever you want. And you can turn this on and off as you go. So a lot of agents I know will turn this on while they're traveling because it's not as convenient to log in and look at a dashboard when you're doing a bunch of site inspections when you're on a FAM, or if you're on a family vacation, you're trying not to be logged into your system all day long. You can turn these on just temporarily, and then when you get back home, just click this to turn it back off. Now back on the dashboard, one thing I should note is admins, you can give this access to non-admins. You can view the dashboard as any of your agents. So if I wanted to click this and view, say, Alicia's dashboard, I could do that. Or if I want to view all agents all at once, I could do that as well. But I have it set to, by default, to just show me when I log in. If I want to look at all agents, I just need to come up here and click that. Now on the agent reminder section, you will see things like this new web reservation request, or new web lead request, or even new web payment request. These are reminders that automatically come in from this system, and the way these come in is when someone fills out what's called an API form. So one of the favorite features of VacationCRM is we have forms that are pre-built. Agents are welcome to use it, no cost to them, as long as you're on the pro version of the system, that you can put on your website and direct clients to at the appropriate time. And when those clients fill out that form and submit the information, it goes straight into your account. So we have 3 main forms. There's kind of a fourth that's very similar to one of the other 3. I'll talk about that later. But the 3 main forms, we have a registration form, a payment form, and the last one is called a trip leads form, but it's really like a request info form. You can somewhat edit them, somewhat customizable. You can't wipe everything out and start over and put absolutely everything you want in there, or delete everything that you don't want in there that comes with it, but you can customize it a little bit. Now I have them on our website on a page here for API forms just to show what they look like on a website, any website. So the idea with these is you would create pages on your website for each form, and then embed the forms on each page, and then make it whatever URL you would like to direct your clients to that page. Just for demo purposes, I have all of them on one page, but that wouldn't be very typical because then you have to tell the client, which form within that single page to go to. So anyway, this is what it'll look like on a website. Of course, you can change the colors here to match the theme of your website. And this is the registration form, which is the one I'll spend the most time on because it's by far the most widely used form that we have. And it is really designed to be sent to the client when they're ready to book. So by the time someone is filling this out, they've already been quoted, they know the pricing, the dates, and they've said, hey, that looks good, let's do that. That's when you'd ask them to fill this out. So there are 5 steps for them to fill out. The first one is passenger information. If you have more than one user on your account, there will be a drop down where they can select which agent they are working with. And here they're going to say, let's say it's a couple going somewhere, so they're going to select 2. And because they selected 2, now they can enter name, gender, and date of birth for each person. Step 2 is the contact info. And then step 3 is where they're going to go back to the information you sent them when you quoted them, and they're just going to confirm exactly what they want from those options. So this resort or cruise, these dates, this room category. Some other questions: do they want travel protection? This is something I added just to show that you can customize it and add your own things in there. Step 4 is payment information. So once they select a credit card type, they can fill out their card number, billing address, name on the card, all of that. And then they can tell you how much they want to pay for their initial deposit. So they can pay in full, deposit only, or if they want to pay somewhere in between the two, they can select other and just type in a dollar amount. And then finally, step 5 is just any requests or comments. There are some terms here that are customizable, and then the client will check I agree here. They will sign with their mouse or finger, and they will click submit. So when they submit that, they will see a little pop-up that says success or thank you, and then whatever message you want below it. You can put a little paragraph there about, thank you for your submission. We'll be in touch shortly, something along those lines. And then the agent they selected at the top will receive a very basic email that'll just say, this client name filled out this form, go to your dashboard to view. Now there is a second email you can turn on to go to either the client or the agent or both, that is a copy of the information that was submitted on the form. That way the client can see right away to make sure they didn't have any typos or wrong dates of birth or anything like that. And then on your dashboard you will have a new web reservation request from whatever day they submitted that. So I have one in here that I did a few years ago that I just used for demos here. So Mark filled out the form when he was ready to book. Now here he is on my dashboard. So if I click on this trip here, what it will do is it will take me to the trip that the system has automatically created for me when he submitted that form. And in the notes of the trip are the details from step 3. So this is where I can see the options he selected and what he wants, room, things like that. And then down here, of course, I can see the trip date and how long he wants to go for. And in addition to all of this, if I click on the profile tab, you can see that it has also created a profile for this client automatically for me again and filled everything out. So I've got name, gender, date of birth, contact info. In this case, he selected 2 passengers, so it also created a profile for his wife Cindy and linked the 2 together. And I've got his address here, and then finally I've got his full credit card number securely stored in here, and I can click show to see that. And then you can see he selected other. He wants to pay $1,500 for his initial deposit. So by having him fill out that form, I didn't have to do any manual data entry, and I put the responsibility on him for making sure that everything was accurate. So that's the registration form. The other 2 forms I'll just touch on briefly. There's a payment form. All this form actually does is just adds a payment to the client's trip in the system with whatever credit card info they enter here. So I mention that because you can't use this for a brand new client. Because if it can't find that client and their trip in the system when they try to submit this, they will get an error saying confirmation number not found. But it is great for clients who say, hey, I want to make a payment but I have a new credit card number I want to use. That's perfect for this form. And then the last one is the trip leads form, which is just a very basic form to kind of gather some information to figure out what the client is looking for. So they're going to select again an agent. You can also put an option for let us pick for you if the client has no clue who to go to. That option will send that lead to the admin of the account, and then the admin can pass it along to whichever agent they feel it should go to. But again, very basic. It's just name and contact info, how many adults, how many children, what are their ages. And then here's where they're going to tell you a little bit about what they're looking for, like when, where, what's the occasion, what's their budget, what's important to them. Again, you can add up to 10 custom fields to this. Now this form will also create a profile just like the registration form does, but in this case, rather than creating a lead, it will create a trip for you. I'm sorry, that was backwards. Instead of creating a trip, it'll create a lead for you and add it in here. And again, in the notes of the lead will be the details from what they're looking for, what they submitted on the form. Now before we move on from here, another feature that we added that is tied into the leads here, and this feature is the only one that I will show you today that has an additional cost on top of the regular subscription cost, but it's completely optional, and that is a feature to send quotes or itineraries to your clients. And a lot of agents use the itineraries feature to send somewhat like travel documents to the client. I have an example of a quote I created just to kind of show what that would look like. So this is a quote for a client to go to an anniversary trip to Mexico this past December. And the way this works is we have a library of items, and we're always working on adding to that library. But you can add your own items if there are hotels that you sell or cruises that you sell that we don't have templates already created for. You're welcome to create your own and save them so you can use them again in the future. But we do have quite a few in there as well. So these are the components that I plugged in to create this quote. So the first one is where I just introduce the client to the information below. I let them know it's for 2 adults for these dates. Here's what the pricing below includes. Here's the deposit requirements, and then we get into the two options I've provided them with. So when I plug these templates in, the master templates for the resorts have all room categories and no pricing, and then all of this information here. So you can see there's pictures, information on the property. You can embed videos in there. And then when I get to the room prices or the room options, what I did here is I pulled out the rooms that I wouldn't want to offer this client, and I put in pricing for the ones that I do want to offer them, so they can see the options that you're providing them with, how much it's going to be for each one. There's pictures of most of the rooms here, and then more information on the rooms, like what each room includes, what they get extra if they go with upper rooms like a Diamond Club or Preferred Club or anything like that. Option 2 here, secrets. Again, information on the property, pricing with each room, and pictures. All rooms include these things. Preferred Club gets you this, and then more pictures down here. And these pictures they can click on to view in a larger size if they want to see more detailed images. And then I've included that it will include round-trip private transfers, and the next steps is like my call to action, where I just tell them here's what the next steps are. So if the client has questions, they can type in here and click reply, and that will notify you via email, or they can simply just email you directly. Or if they're ready to book and they don't have any questions, they can click this, and you can link this button to your registration form on your website. So they can just go through and fill that out like this. And the Itineraries version of this is very much the same, except it doesn't have all this stuff at the bottom, because obviously it's more about something that is already booked rather than options to book. So again, this feature is completely optional, but if it's something you're looking for, it's very affordable and has quite a bit of hotels in our library. Alright, so back to the dashboard. Another thing you'll probably notice here is these email icons next to all the names in the different sections. So what we did originally is we wanted a way for you to easily email clients those frequently sent emails. So I'll use final payment reminders as an example. So what we did is we created this email template screen here where you can pre-write templates for emails that you frequently send, like final payment reminders or upcoming trip emails or welcome home emails, things like that. So final payment reminders here. All I did was just typed up a template for what I would typically say to a client who has a final payment coming up, and I use these merge fields that are listed at the bottom of each template to have it plug in things from the client's profile or trip into the email like this, and I set it up one time, and now anytime I have a client that I need to email that has a final payment coming up soon, I just find them on the dashboard and just click on the email icon next to their name, and it will open up in your email program, whatever you prefer to use. I personally use Outlook, so you can see here it opens in my Outlook with an email ready to be sent, and it plugs in the client's name, balance, due date, things like that. So you just click that, click send, go on with your day. When you send emails like that, it also blind copies your VCRM account, and what that does is sends a copy of this to the system, and it attaches it to the client's profile under the correspondences tab. So you don't have to look through your sent emails to find an email you sent 6 months ago. You can just look in VCRM. Now, of all of these templates here in the email templates, most of these are not used that often anymore by users, because we also have auto emails where you can have the system send these out for you. There are a few that are still used frequently. Mainly the Invoice is probably the biggest one. This is the email that it will use to send invoices to your client via an email icon. Now this one you can actually set up to 3 different templates for this one email icon. And the reason it's 3 is the idea that you have one email for clients who just made their deposit payment, and one for people who are now paid in full, and then one for those that are just made an additional payment. It wasn't their deposit payment or their paid in full payment or final payment. So when you select the email icon next to the invoices here, it gives you an option to send any of the three that you have set up. So, but back to the final payment reminders. Let's say you don't want to have to send those out manually. It just takes up too much of your day. You can come in here to your auto email templates, and you can turn these on. So that's what I've done here. I turn them on here, and pick the one that you want to work on here, final payments, and then you can check this box to turn it on. Set the number of days before the final payment due date you want these to go out. So I've picked 14. And again, much like the other one you saw in my Outlook, put in the subject, the body, and you've got available merge fields at the bottom of each one. So put those in where you want it to replace that code with whatever it's labeled as, so balance or due date or booking number, and then click save and you're done. So this one, as an example, it will scan my system every morning, and any client that has a trip with the status of deposited, meaning it is a valid trip that is not paid in full, that is due 14 days from today's date, it's going to automatically send this email to the client for you. So it's smart enough to look at the trip status, so if it's marked as paid in full, it's not going to send them an email. Or if they cancel and you mark it as canceled, it's not going to send them this email because they don't have a final payment if it's canceled or paid in full. So these are the different email templates you can set up. You can do things like birthday greetings, you can put pictures in there, anniversaries, currently away if you want to check in on the client while they're traveling, welcome home, quote follow-up. This is tied into the leads, and obviously I haven't put much in here, but it is turned on, so I've got a 3 in here. So what that will do is if I mark a lead as quote sent status today, if it remains as quote sent status and it's still there 3 days from now, it's going to automatically send this email to the client to follow up with them to make sure they didn't have any questions you need to answer or hesitations or things like that. And these can save you a ton of time if you set them up and turn them on, because it's all automatic. Alright, so let's go back to the dashboard and let's talk about putting bookings into the system. So this is where a lot of people have questions, especially new users, so I will try to go through this pretty thoroughly. There are 3 main steps to putting a booking into the system. I'm going to use my profile already. That's step 1, is create the profile. Now if they fill out that registration form I first showed you, it actually does the first 2 out of 3 steps for you, but I'll back up from there to show you what those steps are. So step 1 is you need to create a profile or profiles for anyone going on this trip. Now again, I'm already using mine, but if I were putting a new one in, I would either have them fill out the form when they're ready to book, or I could just come in here and click new profile and put one in from scratch. So put everything in that you have on the client: name, gender, date of birth, phone number, email address, all of that stuff, and then you'll click create at the top, which I've already done. But you will also notice under my profile, under my family and friends, I've got several people linked to mine. So all these people have their own individual profile, they just happen to be linked to mine. So I do recommend that you create profiles for everyone else going on the trip, because you'll need to know records of who's traveled where with who along the way. So it's good to have everyone in there, kids included. These 2 buttons are how you would add an additional profile and link it to this one. They both create the same type of profile. Quick is just faster because you typically don't need all of the information like address and email address for a child or an infant or even a spouse in a lot of cases if they aren't the lead passenger. So create those first. That's step 1. Step 2 is you're going to click add new trip here, and this is the new trip screen. So you will see that same list of family and friends here. So let's say Lauren is going on this trip with me. I'm going to check the box next to her name, and here I'm going to fill out the very basic trip information. There's still another step, so this isn't everything that you're going to do. So for trip name, you can do whatever format you want. If they filled out that registration form, the trip name will be web reservation request, but you can change that to whatever you want. I typically like to do something like what it is, where it is, and when it is. So something like, I'll just select this here, Adult Vacation Secrets from Rome, October 2021. That way if you have several trips under the client's profile, you can tell what is what. And then the status, this is very important because it determines a lot of when and where the trip shows up throughout the system. So I will say it's a waiting deposit, The type is an adult vacation, and destination is Mexico. And then if we scroll down, the only other things you can really put in would be the final payment due date, the trip date, trip duration. You will notice you cannot enter the total or the amount paid or the balance due. That is okay. It'll be blank like this, but there is another step that will take care of that. And actually, in a lot of cases, you can leave these other three items blank as well. Pretty much always, trip date and trip duration you can leave blank. Final payment due date, it just depends on which supplier you booked it through. Now in this case, I'm going to leave all of this blank, and I'm just going to click create here. So now I have step 2 done. Step 3 is where you're going to add a new reservation to that trip. And the reason it's broken down like that is because there might be times where you use more than one supplier to get everything booked. So you use one supplier for the hotel and one for a rental car or a transfer. In that situation, you're working with 2 different suppliers that you've got sales with. You're working with 2 different booking numbers, and you're likely going to receive 2 separate commissions. You want to be able to track all of that accurately. So in that example, you'd have 2 reservations under that one trip. Now that's not the case here. I'm just going to do a single package reservation where everything was booked with the same supplier. So I'm going to say add new reservation here. And for the type, I'm going to say it's a package. And the supplier, I'm going to say is Travel Impressions. And I'm going to put in my Travel Impressions booking number here. Now, depending on who you booked through will determine how you enter the actual details of the booking. So there's 3 real main ways to do it. For some suppliers, we have a direct integration with them, meaning our system is linked up to the supplier system where you can just put in these 3 items and you can click this button and it will import the booking details for you. That's the best way, or the ideal way, because it's very fast. It's a direct connection from the supplier to pull it in, so you know there's accuracy there. But not all the suppliers have the technology to do that, so we have another feature called the VacationCRM stripper. And the way that works is that you basically take the confirmation email from the supplier, and if it's in an HTML format, you just copy and paste it. If it's a PDF, you just upload the PDF, but the system will scan through that, strip out the relevant data, and put it in under the reservation components, depending on which one it is, air, transfer, hotel, whatever. It'll put it in and put your pricing and other things in there as well. Now, some suppliers may not work with the integration or the stripper, so for them you would need to manually enter the details, but for time's sake I'm just going to import a booking from Travel Impressions here. So I've got the basics entered, and you can see I've got nothing listed down here. However, once I click this button, it's going to request this booking information from Vax to pull it in to my account. And you can see it was successful here. Now I've got a balance up here, deposit amount, deposit due date, reservation totals. Now again, you can't enter the totals here, so I get a lot of questions about that from new users. That's because ideally you're going to take everything you booked with this supplier under this booking number and you're going to put it down below in the reservation components section, and that's where your pricing goes. And it'll tally all of those up to give your total up here. So you can see it also entered the commission. Now this is the total commission for this booking. This is the agent's portion. So when you put an agent in, if you're an admin, and you put their commission percentage in there, like this case, this agent's on an 80-20 split, so it calculates 80% of this is $551, and that's the agent's portion. But down here is where it really saved me a lot of time, because it pulled in all of the reservation components for me. So you can see I've got 4 flights here: Indianapolis to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Cancun, and then I've got the return flights back home, and the hotel, and all of that. And you can see the pricing is entered here. Now you can adjust these prices if you ever need to for whatever reason, but if you're pulling from the supplier, you likely don't need to do that. Now everything you do with these components here is essentially building the invoice for the client. So there are a couple things I always like to do. For one, I like to put things in chronological order, so it's just easier to follow along for the client. Now there's a couple ways to do that. The first step to take, I recommend, is use this button, Order Reservation Components by Date. This will sort everything by date below, and that will usually get you about 90% of the way there, maybe even more. Some items don't have dates, so there may be some times where you need to move something around in addition to this, and then just kind of look through it. So we've got the flights. That's the first thing the client will encounter on their trip. That is correct, 1 and 2. And then we've got a transfer, and I'm going to fill in the transfer company here. And then the hotel, and I'm going to select the hotel chain here as well. And then the flights back home. Now sometimes when you pull stuff in from the supplier, it'll pull in some extra things you don't really care about, nor do you want to show on the invoice, like this. So I'm just going to say do not show an invoice here. Same thing here and here, and this one as well, and this one here. So now you could delete a lot of this stuff if you wanted to. Instead of hide it like this, you could safely delete. But be careful with that, because sometimes it puts a negative dollar amount in there if you book during a promotion, and if you delete this negative $150 component, it's going to increase the trip cost by $150. So you got to mess with your numbers again to get the right cost. I'm going to leave the travel protection here, and then I'm going to hide this service fee as well. And we'll just click save again. You can do it at the top or the bottom, doesn't matter, they're all the same. Now if you were manually building that, you would add your components piece by piece as needed. So you could put air, add new, and that would add a blank air component for you to fill out. So you add everything you need here, and then you can put in your pricing and all of that there. Once you've got everything in the right order and you've hidden the things you don't want, you can also put invoice comments if you want to put any notes under this. Like maybe I want to put where they need to go at the airport to find their transfer. I can just type that in here. Same thing for like the hotel. I could put in any things to do with the hotel in here. And the reason I selected the hotel chain while we're down here is because whatever I select here plus whatever price is in here is added to the revenue by hotel chain report. So you can keep track of your sales with, in this case, AIC or whichever brands you sell. And you can edit this list as you go. If you want to add more to this list, that can be done. Alright, so you put everything in, you save it along the way. Once you feel like you've got everything entered and it looks good on this screen and you've got it saved, you're going to want to come up here and preview the invoice. And this is an example of what the invoice will look like. This will be your logo, obviously, the agent's info, the client's info, and then here are the details, and this is why I put it in order for the client here. And then the totals here, and then terms and conditions down here, which are customizable as well. So if you preview it and you see something wrong or something you forgot to finish doing, come down here, edit it, save it again, preview it again. Once you're satisfied with the preview, then you can go ahead and click Generate Invoice. And it says one was generated. Every time you click Generate Invoice, it will attach a copy of this version of the invoice to the client's trip. So the idea is you would generate an invoice after every payment or after anything changes. So if the client deposits and then a month later they add an excursion to this trip and you put it in and it raises the cost, you would put those details in and then generate another invoice. Or if they just make a payment, once you record the payment, generate another invoice, and then you can send it to them. So I'm going to click on the trip name here to go back to the trip screen where we started, and you can see because I imported that booking, it's showing the final payment due date, trip date, all of that pulled in, as well as the total and the balance due and all of that. And if I scroll down here, here's the reservation I entered, and here's the invoice. So I can actually this is where I would send the invoice to the client if I was ready to. So I'd click this and I'd select which one I want and click submit, and it would open in my case in Outlook. Now before I move on from this, let's go back into this reservation just for a second and talk about the pre-registration program. So we are connected as well as, with suppliers, we are also connected with some of the pre-registration programs that are out there. So when you select the hotel chain, if you see a button that says register with hotel chain, that means we are connected with that hotel chain. So in this case, AIC, meaning I can pre-register my bookings with my AIC account rather than having to log in to do that, manually. So I think this was Hard Rock Cancun. Yeah, so we've got all that. You can fill out the number of guests, number of rooms, the booking amount. Make sure this is the email address that you have registered with them. Click register and it will send it off to them automatically for you. Now, if I were to select, say, AM Resorts, for example, that button is no longer there because we are not integrated with them. So you would need to go manually register it with them. However, once you've done that, for your own records, you can mark it as registered here. So you select AM Resorts, click create, and it would add a little note here that would show you pre-registered it on July 9th. Okay, so we've got all the booking information in. I've got an invoice generated. So before we move on from that, another feature that we recently added, we added last year, are these invoice approvals. Now these are pretty open to using them kind of however you want. So I'll just give you two very generic examples, but just know that you can customize these and create as many templates as you want for these. And what these are designed for would be this step right here. So if this were a real booking, the client filled out the registration form, I went and booked it to put it on hold with my supplier, and then I put it into VacationCRM. So right now it's just on hold. There's been no deposit being made. I haven't even sent the client the invoice because at this point I would want to send them an invoice approval, not the invoice. And to simplify what the invoice approval is, it's just like the regular invoice, except it can be customized per situation, so you can create additional templates and you can create checkboxes for that, and you can get the client to sign off on it. So in this case, I would just say send invoice approval. So the two I have in here, one for clients who declined travel protection, one for clients who accepted it. So let's pretend they declined it here. I'd select this, send invoice approval. It's going to take me to the review screen where I can make sure everything looks good. This is just the email that it's going to use to send to the client. And you can see here, this looks pretty much just like the regular invoice. But where it would differ would be down here in these terms. I would have a big section in here spelling out what that means because they don't have travel protection. Here's the fees if you cancel. Here's what happens if there's bad weather or whatever, delays, trip interruptions, lost baggage, stuff like that. You're just letting them know they're not covered for any of that stuff. Or if they do have travel protection, you put in what it does and does not cover. And you don't see it on this screen, but on this template I have a couple of checkboxes that I'll show you here in a second for the client to check. So we'll click send here. And I'm going to actually pause my screen here and pull up my email so you can see the client copy of this. 1 second here. Okay, so this is the email that I received from VacationCRM as a client saying, please review and sign and send this back to me. So I'm going to click on this invoice link here. And this is what I'm, as a client, need to go through and read and make sure everything's accurate. Read through the terms, and then I've created 2 checkboxes. You can add up to 3. You can make them say whatever you want, but I've also made these required, so the client has to check these boxes to agree to everything, and then they will type their name for their signature, and then they will have the approve or decline button. So in this case, I'm going to approve this, and then I get this little thank you message, and then I can just close out of this window. And then I'm going to refresh the trip screen here, and if I scroll down now, in addition to the regular invoice, I also have an invoice approval that is marked as approved. So originally it was sent status, but it shows that this was approved by the client on this date at this time. And if I ever want to view the signed copy, I can just go in here and I can view it here. and see that it was agreed to and the name was signed here. So that's a good document to have if they try to do a chargeback, to show that you sent them all the terms and conditions and they signed off on them prior to you running their card for anything. That'll help prove that they knew what they were getting into. Alright, so once they've done that, let's say that you want to make their payment, with the supplier, the deposit payment. Now, this again depends on the supplier that you're using. If it's a one-off or a smaller supplier that we are not connected to at all, you would first want to go to your account with the supplier and make the payment directly, and then you'd add a payment in here just to update the invoice. So let's say they pay $500 on today's date, and it is their initial deposit. And when you click payment source, it'll show any credit cards that you have stored to the client's profiles of the clients that are going on this trip. So let's say we're using my Visa here. And if it's a supplier that we are not connected with whatsoever, you don't have to do anything with this associated reservation. You would just come in here and click create. And all that does is adds like a dummy payment to this trip to show that as far as the balance goes and on the invoice. What this is for, though, is some suppliers we have a two-way integration, meaning you can import bookings in, but you can also submit payments to them from VacationCRM. So ALG brands and Vax are one of those suppliers, or many of those suppliers that we do that with. So if this were a real booking, I would select this, and rather than click create, I would click submit payment to supplier. Now, clicking that button is like swiping their card. So if you were going to use this, be sure that this is 500, not 5,000, and everything else is correct. You selected the correct credit card. Click this, and then just wait for the response to come back to let you know if the card went through or not. That's a big time saver, because then you're not doing two steps. You don't have to go to the supplier, make the payment, and then put a dummy payment in. You're doing it all at once. But again, this is a fake booking, so I'm just going to click create. And now you're going to see a new balance here of $55.17. And then after every payment, I'm going to generate another invoice, which I've done here. And now if I click on the trip name to go back to the trip screen, if I scroll down, we're going to have two invoices generated there. So again, I would send them the second invoice. And if you just want to see what the payments look like on there, it shows the date, card type, the last four, name on the card, and the amount, and then the new balance down here. Alright, now while we are on the trip screen here, let's go over a couple of features related to the trip here. So I talked at the beginning of the call about reminders, and you will see a button like this on most screens. You'll see it on the profile screen, the trip screen, the reservation screen, the lead screen, payment screen. Lots of different screens have this. Where you click this from, which screen you click it from, determines where that reminder goes, or what it goes under. So if you had a client that you created a profile for and they were interested in a trip, but then they back out because timing isn't good right now to travel for them, whether for whatever reason, maybe you'd want to put a reminder under their profile to check back with them in 6 months. That makes sense. But if it has something to do with a specific trip they are taking on, you'd want to put it under their trip, not under their profile. It just organizes it better that way. So I could come in here and click new and put in the date I want this reminder to be due, type in whatever I want it to say, click create, and that would add this reminder to this trip, which would then show on my dashboard. Or if I have several to enter, I could click create, add new, then do the next, create, add new, and just put them all in. However, we have another feature for that, because what we found was that a lot of the reminders that agents were using were the same reminder over and over again every time they book a new trip, because you have a process that you follow typically. So a lot of times you're using the same 3 or 4 reminders for every trip. So under utilities, we have a feature here called reminder groups. And what these are basically like batches of reminders that you can pre-set up ahead of time and apply in bulk to your new trips as you put them in. So you can see I've got several in here, and we'll just use this one as, we'll use generic reminders as an example. So what I did is I clicked add new reminder group, named it, and then I selected the trigger screen. So this determines two things. One, where you can apply that batch of reminders to, which screen you can apply it to, and then secondly, it determines what triggers you can use to set when those are due, which I'll explain here in a second. So trip is going to be the most common one, I would say. It has the best triggers. So you create that, click save, and then you're going to go to the reminder tasks. This is where the individual reminders go. So let's say one of the reminders you want to put in is a reminder for yourself to reach out to the client at some point to offer some excursion options. So I clicked add new task and I named it excursions. This is the text that I will see on my dashboard, and then I've said I want that to remind me 90 days before the client's trip date. So when you use trip as the trigger screen, you can use dates related to the trip. So there's a long list here, but there's really four main ones you're going to use. Created date, which is when the trip was created, which is typically when they book. Final payment due date, trip date, or return date, and then X amount of days before or after that. So that was one. Maybe another one's passport. Maybe you want them to, check their passport, reach out to them at some point and say, hey, make sure you can find your passport. It's still valid, all of that. X amount of days before the trip date. You don't want to forget to pre-register the booking, so you could put a reminder in for that, and that one could be triggered, say, 5 days after the trip is created. So you put all these in one time, and now every time you book a trip, you could say, I want to apply a whole group of reminders. Select the one that you want, and then it will do the math for you based on the trip date or the created date or the return date or whatever. So it's showing that these reminders are due on these dates. Now let's say this particular client already said they aren't interested in doing any excursions. Don't ask them about that. So you obviously don't want to remind yourself to ask them. So you'd say, let's ignore this one, but let's say the rest of them are good to keep. We will click apply, and it would add those reminders to this trip, which will then show on my dashboard. So that was the first feature we added of the two that I'm going to show you now, this one and the next one. But what I realized once we created this and I started playing around with it was a lot of the things I could think of, like the excursions ones, were simply reminders for me or the agent to go email something to the client. And then I decided that we probably shouldn't have to make all these reminders for agents or users to have to manually type in emails to send to clients for each one of these. So we created another feature here, again under utilities, called email groups. And we've had this feature for quite a few years now, and it's still one of my favorites because it just has a massive time savings potential. And this is kind of like automated emails and reminder groups merged into one new feature. So basically you're setting up batches of emails that will automatically get sent to the client rather than setting up reminders for you to go email the client. So these I feel work best at a destination level. Ultimately it's up to you how you use these. It's pretty flexible, but I think destination works best. So you can see I've got Disney, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Mexico. You can put whatever you want in there. Now, I know this trip here is to Mexico, but I'm going to use Jamaica as an example because I actually have quite a few emails under that. Alright, so if I click on edit next to this one, again, this is exactly the same as the reminder groups. You name it, you select your trigger screen. However, when you click this, rather than setting up reminders, you're setting up actual emails. So the first one I have in here is Club Mobe. Maybe that's a service that you like to sell or at least tell people about and offer it to clients. So why not create an email that can automatically go out to tell them about it so you don't have to think about it. So that's what I did here. I created an email, threw a couple pictures in here. Here's what you get with the arrival. Here's what you get with the departure. Let me know if it's something you're interested in. Now these here have a new merge field that you don't have elsewhere in the system, this 60 before trip date. And the way you would use that would be something like this. So you put in the deadline to book this, or when stuff opens up, if you're talking about like Disney for dining, and it will calculate 60 days before the trip date and enter whatever date that is, like June 27th or whatever. But you can change that 60 to any number you want, 80, 90, 100, 30, 20, whatever, and it will do the math and put that date in there. And then you could do like excursions again. You could do extra fun things, like maybe you want to send a recipe to whatever destination they're going to kind of build some excitement leading up to their trip. You could do things like that. You could do like fun facts or travel pro tips, or like this, things to know. So for Jamaica, these are just things that the client should know, like apps they can download beforehand, or currency information, or voltage converters, whether they need them or not, customs and immigration forms, COVID requirements, anything you could possibly want. And you could even start doing things on specific resorts that you sell there. So I've got a couple in here, not a bunch, but this would be information on secrets. This would be information on different couples resorts that I can include for the clients going to those resorts. So again, you put all these in one time, and now anytime you book a trip to, say, Jamaica, you say apply email group, select the one that you want. It does the math for you. You can ignore any that don't apply to this client. Like, let's say they are going to secrets, so I don't want to send them info on couples. And then on these, you have one more option that you didn't have in the reminder groups, and it's this here. If I turn this off here, it's only going to send this email to the lead passenger of the trip. So if it's a family vacation, that's probably perfect. It goes to one person. They relay the information to the rest of the family. If you're booking a trip that's more like a friend's trip, where it's more like a roommate situation, you probably do want it to go to not only the lead passenger, but also the additional attendees as well. So you turn this on, and it will basically send out emails on these dates. Now we'll leave this as is, and I'll just apply it. Now once it's applied, you can also adjust it before it goes out. So like if I look at this Club Mobe one here, and it's going to send out on August 19th. If I wanted to change that, like maybe I want to send it earlier in the week, or a week earlier in general, I could say let's send it on Tuesday the 10th, and click save, and that will change the date that one will go out. Or if before then the client does reach out to you and they book Club Mobe, you could delete this so it doesn't send out to that client. So there's, if you get creative with these, there's, potential for hundreds of emails that it can send out automatically for you every single month that you don't have to think about. So it's a huge time saver. Alright, so now one thing I kind of skipped over that I'm going to come back to now is group booking, information on group booking. So groups are handled almost exactly the same as any other booking as far as the actual trips go. Because the way VacationCRM sees groups is just a bunch of individual trips put together. So when you're entering booking details, this is all the same. However, there are some steps at the beginning that are, additional steps that you don't have to do with a, simple honeymoon or a family vacation. So this is mainly for contracted groups. You can use it for flex groups, but it's a lot of steps that I don't know that are necessary for a flex group, but ultimately it's up to you. So let's pretend we have a contracted group that I just got a group contract signed on, and I want to put that in here. So the first thing you want to do is go to your search screen, and you want to add a new group profile. And then the group name, kind of like the trip name, you can kind of do whatever you want. So something like that. And we'll say it's a wedding, and you don't have to select a supplier or the reservation type or anything like that. You do want to select a trip date though. So let's see, what did I say? May 2022. We'll just say that. And the final payment due date. Now, when you're putting these in, make sure you're entering the right year, because a lot of times groups are booked so far in advance. What I'll see people do is they'll just go to the calendar and go back to May, because it's July right now, but they'll select May of 2021, which actually already passed. So then they won't see that group when they need to link their trips to it. So make sure you put in the right year there. So I'll just put in the basics right there and click create. And now you're going to see some more options here. So you see these links here. The group details, which we just entered, and then scrolling down you have a couple of other things you can do. So this invoice information, this is just a way for you to enter like a notice or something at the top of every invoice for anyone that is booked into this group. So if there's something important that you need to tell everyone that's part of this group, you can title it however you want and then put whatever text you want in there, and it'll show at the very top of their invoice. Trips linked to group. This is where you will see the trips that you end up linking to the group once people start booking into it. Before we get to that point, the next thing you want to do is add your group rooms. So again, if it's a contracted group, you're going to add the rooms. So let's say you have 10 Ocean View suites in there. And then there's a couple of other options here. Do you want to hide it from the registration form? This is for the group registration form that I'll talk about in a second. Typically you don't want to check this because you want the clients to be able to see the rooms that are available on hold for that group. So if you check this, it'll hide it so they can't select it. What this is almost always used for is, let's say you have a contractor group for a destination wedding and the wedding couple has a higher end room category that you only have one of on hold. You want to add it to your inventory, but you don't want it on the form because you don't want any of their guests to be able to select that, to book it. So you'd select this for the wedding couple's room. And then here, hide inventory. If I don't check this, the first person that books will see there are 10 of these available. If they book this room and the next person looks, it'll show 9, and so on. If you check this, it hides that number from the form, so it's up to you. You don't have to do anything with linked trip, especially when you're first adding the first 10. You won't do anything at all. So we'll just click create. So now you can see I've got 10 Ocean View suites in here, and then let's add, say, 10 more rooms, and let's say oceanfront suites. So now you can see I've got 20 rooms, which should match your inventory of your contract. You've got that in there. The next thing down is transportation. If you want to provide like upgraded transfer options, you can add those in here. I know a lot of agents don't worry about that, especially initially, because it confuses clients, so you can leave that alone. Group custom fields, what this is for the group registration form. If you had things that you wanted information you needed to gather, or things you wanted on the form to ask clients specific to this group, you can add those here. So for example, let's say you were giving out, themed t-shirts for the group. You could add custom fields that are drop downs on the form for like passenger 1 t-shirt size, passenger 2 t-shirt size, and then anyone that fills out that group form will have to select their shirt sizes so that everyone's shirt sizes. You won't have to email them later, but that's for kind of one-off situations, so I'll leave that alone for right now. And let's just save this. And then you have this agency group registration link. So this is a registration form just like that first form I showed you that is tied specifically to this group. So if I open this in a new tab here, it's just like the regular registration form, except when you get into step 3 and the room type, on the regular registration form it's just a text box. Now that this is tied to this group, they can select only from what's available. So this person might want an Ocean View suite, and again, those custom fields that I mentioned you could add for the t-shirt sizes, those would be in this section, and so would the transportation if I added it, but since I didn't, obviously it's not showing here. The rest of the form is exactly the same. So when a client submits this, it will create profiles for the people listed up here. It will create a trip under passenger 1. It will link that trip to this group here, so that would show right here, and it would also link those clients to, in this case, one of the Ocean View suites. So you'd see that is no longer in the inventory, so you can look at this at a glance and see who's booked into that. So I'm going to go to, actually I think what will be easier is if I go to an existing group that I've already put in, just to kind of show some of that stuff. So here, Chris and Laura's destination wedding, I've started to put things in there, and you can see I've got 4 trips linked to the group. And if we look at the group rooms, you can see I can sort by attendees. I can see who's in what room, which rooms are still available, so I can just kind of watch this to see if I need to drop rooms without getting penalized, within the right time frame. And then another thing we added is this way to do group pages, which are very similar to the format of the quotes or the itineraries, but the idea is you're creating a page for the group that you can send to the group leaders, and they can pass it along to anyone that's interested in going on the group, so they don't have to answer a ton of questions. So here I've got a destination wedding to Unico that I've created a page for, and I would send this to Chris and Laura and let them send it out to whoever's interested. So scrolling through it, it's just here's what it is. It's wedding for Chris and Laura at Unico on this date. Here is the resort information, and I only put in the room categories that are available for this group. Some pictures here, then the rates from the contract, and then the steps to book, and again they can click book now and fill out this form. So if you're already doing something like this on your website, it's up to you. You can continue using your own website, but this may be faster or easier for you. You can create pages from VCRM as well. And then finally, one of the other things we changed here is this group info page. So this serves kind of two functions. Initially, it's a good link to send to the group leader because they can look at this anytime, and it keeps up, this link stays the same and it stays up to date with the information on the group. So if you have a very needy group leader that's emailing you frequently asking for updates on who's booked and what room they're in and what dates they're traveling, you can just send them this link one time and just say, hey, check this link. Anytime I update something in my system, it updates on that link, so you can see real time exactly who's booked what, when they're traveling, how many nights, what room they're in, things like that. Then after the fact, after you get everyone booked, you can also check this box to show flights on the group info page, and I have a separate video that goes more into this, but to show you kind of a summary, it will also show transfers, and then it will also show flights. So you can send this to your supplier or whoever's doing the transfers, so they have a list of each person, what airline and flight number they're coming in, arriving at, so they can sort by arrival. And then so whatever transfer company I'm using can look at this and say, okay, on the 21st we have pickups at 9:45, 11:20, 11:20, and 11:55. And then they know clients are leaving to go back home on the 25th. They've got a flight taking off at 1:20, 2:20, 3:15, and 4:50. So you don't have to create your own separate spreadsheet there for that. So that's a big time saver as well. Alright, so that's most of the group things. So now I'm just going to briefly go over the two different options for reports. So system reports we'll go into first. These are the original reports that we've had from the start. These are still functional, but the downside to these is they're not customizable. You can change the parameters when you're running these, but you're stuck with these reports. What you see here is what you get. But again, still very functional for certain uses. So I won't go through all these by any means, but I'll just kind of show a couple of them. Revenue by agent's a really popular one, and typically I will do this by trip date for the entire year. We'll leave everything else as is, and we will just show on screen. And so what you'll get here is, again, this account has several agents on it, but it calculates sales for each agent, one agent per row, and it shows you where they've made their sales, whether it be cruises, hotels, packages, whatever. Total sales, total expected commissions, and then the agent's portion after any splits. So you can look at this to kind of forecast what someone's going to make as of today for the year, or just see where everyone's at. You can click on these numbers to drill down to see the bookings that make up that package number there, or whatever you could want. There are also similar reports for revenue by supplier or revenue by hotel chain. They're beneficial. And then there's also the comparable, like revenue by agent comparable. This allows you to compare sales, one year to another year side by side for the same dates. So if you want to track, like where was I at in sales as of this time last year, or this time in 2019 or whatever, you can compare 2 different years to each other. You've also got pending and paid agent commissions reports. So this is a very useful tool for processing, or not sending commission, but actually tracking what you owe each agent, per pay period. And I also have a separate video. I don't want to go too deep into how to use it on this call or on this video, but you can look at our YouTube channel. There's a video on how to manage your commissions there that'll go through that. You can send commission statements to the agents. It'll calculate all of that for you. Bookings by agent is another popular one. It just shows individual bookings. So like I said, a lot of good reports in here, several group reports. However, we also have the custom reports here. So if you want to report, for whatever it may be that's not in the system reports, you can create your own custom reports in here. So this folder right here will come with all systems. So these are just sample reports that I've created for, just to give people ideas, or you can use them right away. So like maybe you want to do a pie chart on all your leads that are closed or lost and compare the two. Just what percentage by dollar amount am I closing versus am I losing? And it's just, again, a simple pie chart. Closed 68.6%, lost 31.4%. And you can, of course, drill down on these to see, which clients or agent or bookings make that up. So you can do pie charts, you can do bar graphs, like let's see what we have in here. You want to see like maybe your sales by trip type, by trip date. So, what types of travel am I selling more of? So for this year, it looks like I've sold, I have a lot that are unlabeled, but of the ones I did label, I'm selling more adult vacation than anything else. And you can change, let's compare this to last year and just click refresh. Again, last year I sold primarily adult vacations. So you can do those. You can do list reports. There's also this map report, which is kind of cool because it's kind of unique. It's an actual map of the world, and it shades in the countries darker green as you sell more volume there. So this is a really old account. So I have 520 trips with no destination listed. But if I look at the ones that I did enter a destination, you can see I'm selling far more in Mexico by dollar amount and trip count than anywhere else. And again, I can drill down if I want to see who sold what to each destination. Things like that. But really anything you could possibly want, you could set up a report for. Depending on the situation, will determine whether you want to do a pie chart or a bar graph or just a list report, kind of however you want. And you can create different folders and things like that. So anyway, I think that was a pretty good overview of the system. Hopefully this was beneficial. If you still have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to us. You can email us at sales@VacationCRM.com if you have additional questions. We'll be glad to help you. Thank you.